My name's Rob Maitland. I'm the facilitator or moderator for the discussion. All right, on junior NCOs or people that were part of Rwanda. Thanks for that, sir. Firstly, I want to introduce Major General Chris Smith, DC, AM, CSC, WO1 Brian Buskell, OM, CSM, WO2 Brian Milligan, and WO2 Damien Timms. A fun fact, I have to remember to use this. Fun fact is, out of 5 of us up here, there's 3 secure supporters, so there's a lot of resilience sitting up on this stage.
Where they go on the weekend?
They got beat by GWS.
Resilience, yeah. Right, the first part is setting the scene. All right, so personal stories. Gentlemen, can you describe your role and key responsibilities, actions in Rwanda?
So, I was a section commander in Bravo Company 2RR, we just changed to 2RR. Pretty obvious, infantry section commander, security, either outside the compound, inside the compound, at the hospital. That was my job, security. My main role though was keeping 6th Platoon in check, because they were like first in line of the mess, always taking the vehicles they shouldn't have taken. So that was my main role anyway, keeping 6th Platoon in check. You'll see who 6th Platoon is in me.
Thank you for getting to talk to what I see as the future of the Army. Unlike the other fine gentlemen on the stage, I wasn't a commander in Rwanda, and I'm the youngest, if you don't know that. We just knew that. Prior to deploying, I completed the recon course, and so my key role was as a lead scout and then later as a second 2IC whilst I was over there. I got my chance as second commander on operations later in Timor, 4 years later. But as a scout in Rwanda, it saw me and another colleague, my 2IC, handle a lot of independent tasks. For example, conducting operations at UN force positions around the area, monitoring threat force movement across borders, infiltration through minefields. So every now and then we'd be watching these minefields and something would blow up in them. It wasn't us, it was the people that were trying to get across it. Deadly volcanic lakes around the area. They had bugs in it. If you went into it, you weren't going to come back. Monitoring villages with diseases and outbreaks. We'd have a report and we'd say, hey, go to this village. And then we'd say, what's at the village? Ebola. We'd quickly turn around and drive off. And even performing protection duties at the Cove massacre when I was attached to the UN Provost Marshal. All of us did stretcher bearers at the hospital, local area and greater country protection, driving around doing patrols. Also the daily grind of dodging death birds and these big fat birds who would eat dead bodies and drop stuff on. Was it 4 months? No. The last thing coming to it, because I should have been your time, was dodging my platoon sergeant, known as the world's angriest man.
Good afternoon all. Brian Milligan. I was a section commander in 6th Platoon, and I was made it my business to steal Brian Buskell's vehicles. I'm privileged to have the opportunity to sit beside my platoon commander at the time, then Lieutenant Smith, and it's good to actually still be serving alongside him. Same things as Damien. We did security. We actually did security for clinics for the medics going out on, and they were all ADF medics, not just Army medics, out on tours to densely populated centres outside of Kigali. And obviously we go to the hospital, and we also did some other security tasks.
And I was obviously platoon commander, but I might just set the scene a little bit. So the operation in Rwanda was really, Australia's contribution was a staff for a hospital, and the hospital was to provide medical support to the United Nations force, and then do some other stuff where capacity was available. So the rifle company, us, we were there to secure the hospital, and it was odd because there was if you imagine, maybe you can't, what a typical African city or town looks like. Down the road was the the garrison where we all lived, which I think was the Rwandan Army Officers Academy, wasn't it? So we needed effectively a platoon to secure the where we all lived, a platoon to secure the hospital, and then the third platoon was either on reserve for quick reaction tasks or would go out with the with small hospital and other technical teams to travel out to all the remote United Nations units in the country and then provide medical clinics and do some other stuff in each of the locations. And the truth, we'll come to this, was that the 6 months was mainly horribly boring. And you will know this, but there is nothing worse, there's no harder leadership challenge than bored Australian soldiers. And I think that's what Brian was getting at.
Yeah. The other thing too about the company, we were left alone. Every task I did was outside the wire as a section commander. Either on the border of Uganda, to the north, to the west, on the border of Zaire, or to the south, by myself, with the rest of the crew that would come on the task with me. Occasionally, Steve Tilbrook, my platoon commander, would come out for a task. If the task required 2 sections, we'd go as a half platoon. But it was very rarely that the lieutenants got to leave the compound, to be quite honest with you.
That's right.
We got taken to the hospital, that was it. That was their task outside the wall.
Thanks, gents, for describing your roles and responsibilities. Next question is, what would you describe as a key experience that influenced you as a leader?
I'll go first. So it wasn't Rwanda that influenced me as a leader. There's 2 key things that I think, when I look back on my life, that influenced me as a leader. The first one was a trip that I did when I was 16 years old with my father to Kokoda. He was a veteran of Kokoda. He had one leg, he lost his leg at Kokoda, and we walked it together with my brothers. And as we'd walk different parts of the battlefield, he'd read his battalion's history to us. And that was the very first time he'd ever spoke about World War II to any of his sons. So that was one thing that influenced me to want to build. The other thing that influenced me was our neighbour, Mr. Yates. He was a Lancaster bomber pilot in World War II. He flew from 1940 to 1945, 3 tours of duty. That's about 120 flight missions. I didn't realise he was going to influence my leadership until I became a Lance Corporal when he died. And he gave me his diaries. And I read them. And what clicked in my mind was what he did after every mission, 120 missions. He sat down with his crew and spoke about their mission, one-on-one, how they could improve, what he could do is better as a flight sergeant, and what the crew needed to do better to go to the next mission. That had a big influence on me because he did 120 missions. If you understand anything about the bomber offensive in World War II, the survival rate was 23%. So they're the 2 things that influenced me to be.
Spike? Basically, what influenced me as a leader, and funnily enough, after over 40 years of service, I'm still learning. Okay, what's influenced me the most have been my commanders and my soldiers. Okay, they have been instrumental in forming my leadership and my ability to lead and command soldiers when required. Okay, that's the thing that's helped me the most, and it's given me the most guidance and influenced my decisions that I've made as a leader.
Probably to reinforce what was said about the Kokoda track, and I just then sort of gel. Myself and DCA walked it together, it's one of the points he brought up, and obviously Chief of Army had as well, is about reading. And I remember DCA handed me a book, and it was about the spirit of Kokoda, and I read that just prior to doing it. It actually enriched my experience a lot more. Leading to that experience, I would say there's not just one single thing, there's so many different things, and it's about that journey to being a great leader, or hopefully being one, is that nirvana. It's trying to get as much experience and about the journey, trying to get there. When you get there, it will be about you inspiring others to do great things, rather than you looking for other people to inspire you.
All right. So for me, the hard part was I was the inexperienced, untrustworthy person that I spoke about. I came out straight out of. I knew I was going to 6 Platoon B Company before I'd even finished at Duntroon. I got told on Melbourne Cup Day in 1994. So I went straight to the battalion. I was only there for 2 or 3 weeks, and we delinked 2 4RR to become 2RR. And then a week later or something, we were off. So I didn't even do my ROBC. So this point about competence and I think most of the platoon knew I didn't do the ROBC, and I think that was on the platoon's mind. Is it like, who's this new guy? And I replaced a very good platoon commander, Andrew Hocking, who was very popular. And then so for the platoon to lose him and to get me, it was at the worst opportunity, and I've come out and I've not even done my regimental officer's basic course. So that was difficult. The other part was, and I'll complete this story, but I had an OC that didn't like me either, and it was difficult.
Didn't like anyone.
But particularly, and I think, to be honest, he resented the fact that he was told to lose Andrew Hocking and to take me. And we're very different characters. He was a short, rugby playing ex-soldier, and I was a tall Aussie rules playing, more academically minded ADFA graduate. We couldn't have been two opposite people. I'm more introverted. He was the almost supreme extrovert, to be fair, isn't he? And it was difficult. And so I felt like I was on my own a lot. And to be frank, I won't mention that. But it was difficult. I think the best lesson for me was how fucking hard that 6 months was. And as a result of it, I came out much better for the experience. And a lot of it, to be honest, was probably learning what not to do more so than what to do. And look, I didn't know this at the time, and my old man was a sergeant in not in Vietnam but afterwards, and I grew up as a kid in the local sergeant's mess, and everybody told me, listen to your platoon sergeant, it was drilled into me. I didn't realise that I didn't have a particularly good platoon sergeant my first 6 months, and I probably put too much faith in him. It wasn't until I got Eddie Penman the next year that I realised, wow, is this what it's like to have a good platoon sergeant? But it was difficult. But the implication it meant that I had to carry a lot of the load, and I realised I was doing things that the platoon sergeant should have been doing, which I suppose the message is that sometimes it's the adversity and the difficulty that actually makes you in the long run a better leader. I think I was a much better leader from that. Certainly, I learned humility, but just to finish the story, at the end of that year, we got back in August.
August, yeah.
The OC left at the end of that year. He never said it to me, but when he left, the day he left a letter on my desk in which he wrote and acknowledged the difficulty and his own, perhaps, flaws in the way he treated me, which I thought was quite, it was quite meaningful to get that. And then we never had much to do with him for years. 2 years ago when we got the MUC?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
And he turned up in Canberra. I didn't know, but he made, and I was a brigadier at the time, and I was handing out the MUCs. He made sure he swapped with somebody to make sure he was in the rank. So I'm walking along, and there he was. And to his great credit, he had had tears in his eyes, and he said, because he went through his own difficulties, in fact, didn't he, after leadership. But anyway, it just goes to show, for what it's worth, I made the point about sometimes hardship's the best lesson. But we're all human beings, and all of these stories have long arcs, like for the same reason that we're sitting here today.
Question for Spike. With a lead platoon commander, you and the other section commanders, how did you approach that with the platoon commander? And was there anything that you tried to cover for any shortfalls, or how did you try to help him and help the platoon?
Well, if I could just go back and I'll just underscore how difficult it was for the General when he was a platoon commander. 6 platoon had been together since at least 1993. We had no reinforcements. We had Andrew Hocking come in as a platoon commander. Obviously, he was replaced by General Smith. At that point, we also got a new platoon sergeant. And in fairness to him, he was recently promoted and he wasn't from a northern battalion. So he came from 5-7. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but basically, let's just say the northern battalions are rather incestuous. We like to have our own people come in because they know the culture, whether it's 1 RAR or 2 RAR back then, or 2 4 RAR, 3 RAR was still down in Sydney at this point.
And
So-
just to add, there was a lot of animosity between the brigades. You grew up in a different brigade.
Exactly.
It's not like it is today. Yeah, so...
So of course, yeah. So yeah, and to General Smith's great credit, he did extremely well. We're covering more for the platoon sergeant because he was learning on the job as well. And even though it was a rather benign operation, it's still an operation. We had a rather interesting OC and even more interesting CSM who were rather demanding and for good reasons. Operations, they don't want to lose soldiers. They want to do the right thing on the mission. So that became a lot. So it wasn't so much covering for the platoon commander. He was growing into his role. We knew
Slowly.
that. Yeah. Yeah, not so slowly, so it was pretty good. And he's growing into the role. We're getting time to develop. And I know I had some conversations with the platoon commander, just tactfully pointing out things because as a junior NCO and also as a senior NCO, one of your roles is to develop young officers, okay? Today's platoon commanders, tomorrow's OC, is next week's CO, okay? And they take a lot from usually their first appointment with their NCOs alike and especially their senior NCOs, okay? So it behoves you to develop your junior officers as well as your soldiers. So does that answer the question, Sam?
I might just add in there too, like B Company had been very stable. Spike said we've been stable for 3 years. So I came out of support company, went to B Company. It was my 3rd year as a section commander in B Company. I've been at 2 IC for 2 years before that in the company. So the company had been very stable. Then A Company deploys to Rwanda at very short notice. No one assumed B Company was going to go anywhere. We fought 8 miles in, because that's where Colonel Roach came from. He was the sir for the 2nd contingent. B Company went for that normal cycle in a year where a lot of guys went up to support company, a lot of guys were promoted, and we started to carry vacancies again. Then new year comes around, new platoon commander comes to the company, new 2IC comes to the company. The OC and the CSM were very stable. The CSM was in his 4th year. I mean, I'll be honest with you, he was hard work. But he was a good CSM on operations, I'll tell you that right now. And everything he made hard before we went on operations made sense to me when I got to Rwanda. And the platoons themselves, I mean, my platoon, 4 platoon, I was the only section commander that stayed there. The other 2 had come in, one came from 8-9 RAR, and the other guy came out of support company. And so did our platoon sergeant. So whilst there was a lot of movement in 6 platoon, there was movement across the company. So when people sit to me and say on the good old days it was stable and nothing happened, that's not true. My section for the 3 years was 5 guys. Rwanda I had 9. So it wasn't the good old days. It was army as normal, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Command accountability in practice. Gents, how would you define command accountability at section level?
Do you want to go first? What?
No, you go.
Okay. Oh, well, I'll write something down. So section command accountability. Ownership is essential. Accepting responsibilities for success and failure. Driving for improvement. However, you need to be empowered. So you are accountable for everything that section does. How well they're trained, how they behave, their standards, their discipline. The buck stops with you. And that's the way our OC looked at it. If your section was underperforming, it was you as a section commander that was underperforming. And then the platoon sergeant and the platoon commander. So I think the buck stops with you. They're only as good as you are going to be yourself. And if you allow things to slide, the section will allow things to slide.
Thanks, Brian.
Exactly right.
You go.
Thanks. Exactly right. You're accountable for your actions and the actions of your soldiers. There have been many a times that I've had 10 bickies with the OC or CO, RSM or CSM, without the T and bickies, about the performance of my section, okay, or platoon. Okay, so it behoves you as junior leaders, regardless of service, to ensure that your section is trained well, they carry out their administration well, and they can do their job. Okay? At the end of the day, they don't care about private such and such in that section. They care about Buskell's section or Milligan's section or Smith's platoon or Tim's section. Okay? That's what they care about. Okay? And as a leader, you need to ensure that your people are performing to the best they can. So you need to identify their strengths, identify their weaknesses, work on their weaknesses. Okay? That's what you need to do.
What I'll talk about is everyone's heard about how things are, the positives for accountability and all that. There was a bit of a failure, so to speak, when it comes to some accountability. So my section commander, he would become very overwhelmed on a lot of things and wouldn't make decisions, at different times. Nice person, everything like that, but, I just wanted to bring it as a bit of a lesson there. There's a point where a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Church, which you probably know about the award, you see that famous picture where he's holding a child. I was standing to the right of that. I'm cut out of it by George Kiddos.
Thank God.
Yeah, they couldn't fit my head in or something like that. It's too big. But of that story about accountability, Jonathan Church was a SAS trooper who was a patrol medic, and he was at the aid station during the Cove massacre, and he had heard word that there was this building down the bottom that had orphans in it, children in it. He actually had turned to my section commander, go, "Hey, can we send some people down there to get it?" The section commander didn't make the decision at all, so being himself, obviously full of courage, he just took off down there by himself, and there was like fire going onto that building and everything like that. As in, they were firing, I think, recordless rifle and just automatic fire. And what was in there was orphan babies and children and everything like that. So he went down there and he came back. I was standing off to the side with my mate, and we go, "What are you doing, mate?" And that's where that picture is. And his actions actually inspired us to get down there and grab the other children and bring them up to the aid station. So I just wanted to bring that and contextualise it, because people don't know sort of the story behind it. But he was an accountable person at the digger level. Sometimes those people will lead you to that positive action. So when there is a failing, look to the soldiers or look to other people just as much.
Thanks, Damien. And deep insight into strong leaders which are developing. Everyone takes some time to grow into their rank, and some are often maybe out of place in many situations. All depends on their experiences prior to that. Gents, what were the key elements of your leadership in complex and uncertain times? Please give a very quick context in your answer as well.
Yeah, so I was a section commander at Cove during the massacre. I arrived in Cove on the 18th of April and we left on the 24th. It was complex, it was just horrible. Yeah, it's just leadership. I don't say complex, it was horrible. You're watching thousands of people getting slaughtered in front of you and there's not much you can do. You can save one or two, you can keep people to the left and right of you alive. Your ROE may say one thing, but you've got pretty clear orders that say a very different thing. Okay? People don't like the word, but stoic. I needed to be a stoic leader standing on that wire that day. I couldn't let my emotions run away with me. It was upsetting. My 2IC was the only guy in the section with kids. He was upset because he was seeing kids the age of his children getting killed or dead in front of him. He was upset about that. The rest of us, we didn't have kids. There was a few married guys in the section. But I found being stoic, I couldn't control everything that was happening around me. I could control some things, but I couldn't control everything. So I put that out of my mind. I didn't show all the emotions I probably should have shown. I didn't. Because I needed to be strong, because my section wanted me to be strong. Now, I'd known those guys for a long time, And they had confidence in me to do my job. And they knew I was going to do something very different that day. You know, a lot of the time in Tully, we'd have discussions about things. There was no discussions that day. I gave direction, they carried it out. So being stoic and adapting your leadership style at a point in time, that's would be my big takeaway. Gents?
I'll talk about the moral decisions and the logical decisions. So sometimes you may be given a thing where you go, hey, you're morally right, but you can't act because the outcome will be, the logic against it will actually be worse than it is. So there's this point where at the Kabaya massacre, where there's a gentleman, displaced person, who was running up, and the threat force was the Rwandan Patriotic Army, and they were going around and obviously they were shooting people. As he was running up to protect him to the aid station, two of my other team members were just in front of him, front of myself. They just engaged, and because they were just shooting people they'd suspected were the people who did all the massacres originally. And the rounds went through, and they went past myself and all the others. So my automatic sort of reaction was, weapons up, and it was a standoff for myself and the actual the Rwandans Patriotic Army. The gentleman was on the ground. He was like out to it, and he was basically he was bleeding out. And I told the other two to get back, just back to the aid station. And this standoff went for a couple of minutes, and then I just dragged the person back. Part of the ROE, I was allowed to, or could have, and morally engage with these people, but the logic, the point I'm trying to bring is, there was only like 30 of us, and there's like hundreds or something like that. You wouldn't do it. So what I'm trying to say, the takeaway is, you may be facing something like that in the future. You need to sort of think, decide, and then act. Just don't go with, someone will say to you, hey, we need to do this, because you'll be out there by yourself, and you'll need to make the decision. So train your people to understand those decisions on what is the right one, logically as much as morally.
I'll just build on what Damien said, and a bit of context. Everywhere in Rwanda, the Rwanda's People's Front or Rwanda's People's Army, RPF, RPA, would have roadblocks. Their roadblocks consisted of a piece of string or a pair of boots on the ground. If you didn't stop at that roadblock, you either got a burst from an AK-47, a Dushka, or an RPG 3-year Land Rover. We didn't have PMVs or anything back then. We just had white Land Rovers, okay, painted white Land Rovers. Okay, so in regards to, our rules of engagement, we could defend ourselves, but against what? Okay, we didn't have the firepower to deal with that. So again, you've got to weigh up the logical way you want to do something against the moral. Okay, and that's, as a junior leader, that's what you need to consider the most in situations like that.
So I'm going to pick up on what Brian said. And the theme here is there's no safe space on the battlefield. And so 6th Platoon got there 5 days. So after the massacre, there was a sort of a quadrangle of buildings at the top of the hill. After the massacre, there was still thousands left of displaced persons. They all brought their sort of what belongings they had left. By this stage, we were just clearing up some of the remaining bodies that were left over. There were still people dying, so you'd go in the next day and find some freshly dead and so on. By this stage, I can't remember. Were you there? Yeah, it was. Yeah. There were pools of seething maggots, wasn't there? And this thick, where the people were living, probably about half a metre thick of just rubbish. They were, when we went in, because our job was to try to encourage people to safely leave, because they feared for their life, and there was still a few Interahamwe in there that were encouraging them to stay. It was effectively the presence of the displaced people was keeping them alive. From the RPA who had a cordon on the outside, we were finding different ways to get them to leave, like a Red Cross truck to encourage them, all sorts of things. But the point was that the place, every square foot There was a human shit with worms in it. That to survive, they were picking the corn out of their own shit so that they could survive. It was a horrible thing. We were still finding babies, not just adult dead. It was terrible. But to go to Brian's point, it wasn't the time. It wasn't. You couldn't put up your hand and say, "Oh, this is all a little bit too much." Notwithstanding, in fact, somebody did, but it wasn't the time. Well, it wasn't the time for a leader to do that. There is no safe space on the battlefield. It's important to know, because I think these days there's almost an instinct against terms like stoic. You know, you might be feeling this, but in that moment when everybody's looking to you, you're not inspiring them with confidence if you want to turn around and start discussing your feelings. There's a point to actually in those moments to having what Napoleon would have called some nerve and having a spine, letting that go. That's true, I think, and that's important that we say that. There's almost a reluctance to. No safe space on the battlefield. And to put it into a fight, your duty as a soldier is to fight to your dying breath until you're relieved. Even if you've only got one useful limb, you use it to fight. That's who we are. That's the core of our business. But what I'm trying to do is put some ideas into perspective here. When you come out of the fight, that's when you have an obligation to get yourself sorted. You have an obligation to get yourself sorted, not for yourself, but the mission depends on you getting back in, whether it's, we're talking particulars of a peacekeeping circumstance, but if it's back into the fight, you need to get yourself sorted so you get back in the fight in good order and win the war. And your team depends on you being available. I think that's actually a really useful point, and I think sometimes we maybe perhaps not as upfront as you were in describing what it is to lead, because otherwise, if leaders didn't have to have that thing about them, then anybody could lead and we could pay monkeys. But there's a certain nerve that goes with it.
I'll give you an example of how confusing that period of time was for me. So arriving in Cove on the 18th, the unit legal officers down to our platoon sergeant doing what he does. We took a CAP mission in to do medical clearances as people are getting on buses and trucks to leave Cove. Because our mission was to help the RPA empty the camp, because the camp was an embarrassment to the Rwanda government. It was the last camp left in Rwanda, but bar the ones on the Zaire border. First day I'm there, the Red Cross trucks are lined up. I parked my Land Rover in Sixby off to the side. People are off doing things. My boss is wandering around, checking stuff out. And I'm watching this line of people go down the side of the trucks to get on board the trucks. Where the trucks are, there's some RPA guys, the Rwandan army, the army of the nation, and they're going through people's things. Okay? This one guy gets there, they go through his bag or something, they find a wad of US dollars, what I thought were some photos, an old Belgian army uniform, and they grab him, drag him out, throw him in the ground, shoot him. At the same time they do that, they throw his wife, 4-year-old kid, and baby into the same gutter. So I've seen this, shit, that's not good. While that's unfolding, right next to me is a Rwandan guy, pulls something out of his wallet, throws it under my 6B, and keeps walking. I go and look under my 6B, what is it? It's a wad of US dollars and some photos of him in an army uniform. He's standing there with his wife and kids. So I stand beside him and walk him to the truck, and I get him on the back of the truck. I then give him back his water bone and say good luck. So I just helped this guy who was probably into a runway not get murdered. Coming back to how confusing it is, and that was the Rwandan army that killed this guy. On the 24th, that RPA is standing in front of me. They're not shooting at me, but they're making sure the people in the compound can't get out. And they're pointing their weapons at the high ready, because you all know what that looks like, at us. It's quite frustrating, because we couldn't really shoot him. I walk out of the wire, I talked in my very broken French and my sign language, and I convinced this section to lower their rifles to low ready. So they weren't as much of a threat to us. About 45 minutes they stand there and I've given him the stay loose symbol. He's smiling at me. They're working with us to keep the people in front of us alive, to keep us alive, to keep them alive. About 45 minutes later, some clown Rwandan officer comes running down the hill with a cane and starts beating this corporal. In my stupidity, I jump over the wire, grab the cane, snap it, push the officer down the creek line and stand the soldiers back up. So one day I'm helping the Interahamwe get out of the camp for not getting killed. The next day I'm helping the Rwandan army for not getting beat up by their officers. It was very challenging and very confusing. And I was making lots of moral decisions, what was right, what was wrong. It was a tough day and a tough gig, I'll be honest with you.
Because who knows, that Interahamwe guy could have killed.
Yeah, that Interahamwe could have killed thousands of people. The Rwandan soldier could have killed me. But I wasn't going to tolerate this guy coming down and whipping him because he was keeping me safe. The guys looked at me really strange when I jumped that wire and broke that guy's cane and basically butt-strapped me down the creek line. And Steve Talbot was quite upset with me. But, you know, I thought it was the right thing to do at the time. And that guy stood up, shook it off, gave me the field signal again, and stood there and kept everyone safe.
And then the people we were encouraging to leave,
Yeah.
we were potentially encouraging to leave, only to be taken by the RPA a few hills over and all executed. It was a morally ambiguous circumstance.
Can I add to that 1 second? So I got to be the protection for the UN Provost Marshal. So I got to drive around and we went out to the hills and that. We'd find thousands of people just put into the toilets, just killed, murdered, or whatever. And it was just like, they gave me a pace counter and I was like 100, 200, 300. I wouldn't even start clicking because there was just so many dead. And then they chuck them in the river just to, I'd say, float back to, you know, where you come from, basically. And that was it. But to reinforce something there, and I know I'm chewing up a little bit of time, but the loneliness of command there was we're on the other side of the planet. Because I remember a couple of days beforehand, I rehearsed Anzac Day because it was coming up, and that 25th, it was totally different because we sent back a VHS tape of me doing, Anzac Day, a cenotaph party at in Kilgaley in the town. But the reality was we were at this massacre, and it was taking days for that information to come back. So all our training, pre-training, everything. It's all you could rely on. There was none of the social media, no communication, nothing. So all you had was your own wit and the backup of your team, and that was it.
Yeah, gents, I'm interested in some of the conversations or how you helped your soldiers or your mates after some of these events that night. Being stoic, not everyone is or can be. Some of these conversations, how did you help your soldiers or your mates or your subordinates?
That's a really interesting question. I remember when we got back. So we came out of Caballo, and Caballo wasn't out in Rwanda, okay, but it was pretty big. We came out of Caballo on the 24th. I was frustrated because someone was getting me up for a dawn service on the 25th because I was pretty tired, but we did it. Did Anzac Day, the other platoons had deployed, and we were back in the camp. I was on guard. We were taken up into the officers' mess because there was a mess. There was a digger's boozer and an officer's boozer. It's pretty cool. And we were sat down in a circle, my section of 9 guys and our platoon commander. A nurse sat in front of us and said, "Right, tell me how you feel." And I'm like, "Really?" That was my response. "Really? Tell me how I feel about what I just saw." We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about it for most of the tour, actually. We spoke about Caballo on one of our UN, we had 72 hours leave every now and again into Kenya. We had a discussion then, got drunk. Spoke about it when we got our medals in the mess, Caballo itself. Then didn't talk about it for only 15 years. And it took a reunion for us to all come back together to talk about it. And now we talk quite often about it. I just went to a reunion on the 30th, this Anzac Day. My section, we talk quite freely about Caballo with each other. I don't know how often they talk about it to other people. I don't talk about it much to people. This is the first time I've opened up to an audience this big, RSM-A will testify. I don't particularly like talking about it. It is a very hard thing to do for me. As a section, we talk about it. But in saying that too, all those guys all went on to have very, very successful careers. Not one of them didn't make WO2. 3 of them were SAS, got out, a couple of commandos, because we confided in each other and we found a way to do that. And we used the system that's available to us. I found out at the 10-year mark, guys were happy to go and talk to the system and trusted it to do its job. Now, I know some of you won't believe that. I know some of you will think if we go and have mental health issues, people find out about it and look at us differently. Well, I don't think they do, because I've got to be RSM-2R and I've got to be RSM-3 Brigade. And I'm now the Command Sergeant of Space Command. Okay? You have to talk about these things. If you don't, you will be no good for yourself or your family. That's all I'm saying.
I keep in contact with quite a few members of my section. By text or phone. I don't have Facebook. I hate that stuff. I'm old.
That's because you're old.
Yeah, I'm very young. Yeah, we talk about it. We talk about Rwanda, but as Brian said, yeah, we don't really talk about Rwanda with outsiders unless you were there. We'll tell you, a bit about what we did and everything, but we really open up to each other, and a forum like this is good for us to do that and let you all know what we did, and hopefully you could learn from our experiences. So if you have to ever face something like this or combat, you'll be a bit more prepared. All this pop screening you hear about now and you see is a result of Kabeo and Rwanda. That's where it all started. So if you want to know, that was the genesis of it, was it Kabeo and Rwanda.
I've got nothing else to add other than I think, like you, I don't think we ever, I don't know, you might have spoken about it with your section while we're over there, but it wasn't a topic, it was just something we did and then you just kept on getting on with the job. So I don't remember, that was probably a failing of mine. It just never, I don't think I did anything special leadership-wise in the aftermath. Yeah. I think it would be different today.
We spoke about the Roth Skull, Tom. I was his RSM too.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So
yeah.
we spoke about
We've discussed it quite a bit.
We discussed it quite a bit.
Personally, I found that different operations as you've done numerous operations, the things you've learnt during those periods are there for you as tools in your toolbox to, in later operations, I've spoken to soldiers or to my section commanders and saying, hey, how are you going with dealing with that situation, and talk to them off the side, making sure they're good to go for the next stage or next mission. So important where you can talk about it, but we do drive it down until the job's finished.
Can I just do one? Actually, that's a really good point. So we come out of the massacre on the 22nd. 22nd. And that was the worst day. My section wasn't going to go back on the 23rd. And as we're driving out, my driver, Wayne Jones, physically stops in his track, so I can't drive any further. What do you mean you can't drive any further? There was a pile of bodies across the road. 6 bodies dead. We had a car. So we had to circle around that. We went around that. We get out. We go back to the Zambat battalion, and we were going to stand down for the next day, have a rest, have a fresh feed. 9 o'clock in the morning, Steve Toolbrook kissed me on the HF, hey, you're coming back today. So my guys are still asleep. I woke them up, let's go, we're going. Not one of them said why. They got in the vehicle and drove out. Comes back to that point. Rob's talking about, sorry.
Can I add a positive? Actually, 2 things. One was about the mental health. So if I look back on reflection, there was a person in my team who actually his wife was having a child at the time. And I remember he actually was standing on a dead baby at the time, and I could just see his brain right then and there just change. And when they talk about mental health and all those sort of things, he now will revert back. It's like his brain's there, even though he physically sort of moved on. So whenever, I sort of have to, I talk to him about stuff like that, but that's one area I could see the change in that person. And if I look back on reflection, there was a couple of people who were like that. And it took me a while to sort of recognise those people that were like that. And, I reach out to them all the time and see how they're going. But some of the positives I found later, like a couple of months ago, I went and spoke to the Rwandan community. I was a guest or keynote speaker at Parliament House. So I did a speech for them because they have their own little community stuff. They invited me in. It was pretty good. And there was a couple of people came along to actually that I deployed with. They actually came in just to hear the speech. So that was a real positive I found for myself. And there was a couple of other things as well. So not everything is doom and gloom.
Thanks, gents. Questions for you all. Ready? What are the critical areas, things you as a session commander are accountable for? What are the critical areas, things you as a session commander are accountable for? Take 1 minute to reflect. Don't write yet. Take a minute to reflect. Now I want you to write down your response. So park that, and we'll, during follow-on discussions during the evening, whenever we can, throw those ones on the road and we'll have a discussion about them. Looking ahead, preparing for the next war. Can you explain the importance of individual and family readiness?
I suppose the army is different now to what it was in 1995. I mean, I don't think we were the Ready Battalion group. We may have been the year before. We come off. Yeah, we just come off it. But if you were living in the barracks, you'd sign in out of the order room. If you were going to Nathan Plaza to go shopping, and then you were going to go in the city to go to the movies, you'd ring up the order room and tell the corporal, "Hey, man, I'm going to the city." And you'd have to have conversations. There wasn't a lot of guys in the platoon married, but the guys that were had conversations with partners and said, "Hey, it's a Red Battalion group. We could deploy." And from my time in 2 Forward, from 88 through to 95, the battalion has stood to 8 or 9 times for short notice tasks throughout the region. We didn't go anywhere, but we stood to. One RA walked out the door very, very quickly when we went to Somalia. And it was inculcated by our platoon sergeants that you had to be able to drop your life to do the mission you were given to do. And there was no, I've got to eat my dogs to the pet, someone look after the dogs. You were trained to understand that if you were the Ready Company group, you need to be able to go overseas. So you know how your family, or you need to talk to your partner about what it was. I got married the year before we went to Rwanda. I told my wife before I got married what my goal, my aspiration in the army was, and that was to be a platoon sergeant at that stage, because that's what my dad had done. And I said, for me to be a platoon sergeant, I've got to get posted to Singleton. She'd grown up in Townsville, had no idea where Singleton was. So I said, I've got to go to Singo, we'll do 2 years there, and then I'm going to get posted somewhere else as a platoon sergeant. Hopefully we'll be back to Townsville. Unfortunately, probably Brisbane, But I had to have a conversation with her about preparing her to help me serve, to get the goals I wanted to get. So I think that was my idea of family readiness. And that was the same thing I spoke to my section. Because one of the guys just got married. Hey, mate, talk to Susie about what it is to be in this section if we go overseas. The reason I say that is because as a Brigade RSM warrior, as Brigade RSM 3 Brigade, when I watched one RA deploy very, very quickly to Afghanistan, some of those partners hadn't had those conversations. It was very hard for those partners to watch their husbands deploy to Afghanistan to do that evacuation operation at very short notice, because they had no idea what it meant for their husbands to be ready, or their husbands and wives to be ready. So you have to have those conversations.
Thanks, Brian. Our next question, could you please give me your top 3 critical things you want every section commander to know? Damien.
It's been touched on before, but trust. Trust is the most important asset. It's the hardest to earn and it's the easiest to lose So you need to be beyond reproach at all times. Next one is standards. Don't pay lip service to it. Make sure you check all your mission essential items before you go out. I witnessed a former CO3 RER check every soldier in his unit prior to going on a warfighter. He also did every PESA and BFA with them. This person led by example. He's now a Padre. He's probably still killing it at that level. And don't be scared to fail in training. So you learn a lot about yourself and your team. You also never wait for perfect conditions, because he who waits for perfect conditions will never act.
Thanks. That's Spike for you. What are the 2 critical lessons you have used to develop your leadership style?
Basically, knowing my soldiers, knowing their weaknesses, and also knowing their strengths. That's helped me a lot. And of course, basically for me, also having the ability to back myself in the decisions I make, okay, and stand by them. Okay, that helps, and because you are answerable for them. So don't be afraid as a junior leader to make those hard and unpopular decisions, okay? You'll know that they're right, most cases, but you need to make a decision and stand by them. And that's what's helped me out a lot.
And sir, thanks, Mike. So how do we ensure our approach to leadership is current?
I disagree with the premise of the question. I'm not sure there is a thing as... I think your leadership's universal. I don't think there's a form of leadership that matches today and in fact the risk of thinking that there is a current or contemporary form of leadership is to use it to justify ways out of some of the hard things that you've just pointed out or discussed, because you can't, there's no fad, there's no silver bullet to lead easy. You've got to, if you don't have the knowledge, if you're not trustworthy, if you're not competent, if you lack humility, if you don't have courage, if in the moment when everybody's looking at you, you lack the confidence, if there's no easy way to get those things, but those things are universal. I think those certainly all the things that we were talking about leadership 30, 40 years ago. So I don't think any of that's changed.
Appreciate it. Before I invite the panel members to conclude, please begin thinking through key lessons you'll take away from this afternoon's activity. Gents, I'd like to invite each of you to share a 1-minute takeaway message from your experiences.
I'd say don't be afraid to train and train hard. You will know your section's limit when you start pushing there. Be humble when you do that. Be there. Be present in that training. Read, as the DCA said. If you have not read Eugene Sledge's book, With the Old Breed, you're missing out on a trick. You need to read. The 2 things I told you about my leadership style, how I learned to be a leader, was from Mr. Yates and my dad. I also read a lot. I had a lot of attention on course. So read. And take every opportunity to train. That's it.
There will be hard times that you'll feel at your lowest. This is normal. Build upon this. To remain current, you must remember the past. So those who we're currently parallel, you could say, with pre-World War II in some aspects. So understand your task and your focus, in particular in the littoral space. Those who forget the past will relive it in the future. You only learn from adversity. Diamonds are only created under extreme pressure. Forge yourself and your team.
Gang, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. After 40 years of service, I'm now the world's greatest section commander. Okay.
You are?
Yeah, I am. I so am. Okay, so don't be afraid to make mistakes. Okay, learn from those mistakes. Learn from the mistakes of others. Develop your subordinates, okay, because they are following in after you and they'll be the future of the army. In Rwanda, I had the opportunity to send my Section 2 IC, my number 1 rifleman, in command of patrols. I still went with them, but I also ran that by the boss before I did that, and I had the confidence in them to do the job. So developed your subordinates as well.
And have a sense of humour. So let's finish with a fun story because this has been a pretty deep context. So I can't remember which section this was, but as 6B parked on the side of the road with centre seating for a break, and everybody's eating rations, and it was survival biscuits and Vegemite. You probably tell this story better than me, but a kid on the side of the road comes up, sees was that you actually eating the biscuits?
No.
I can't remember.
No.
Was it Hunter or something?
I think it was Hunters.
Yeah, and he the kid comes up to the vehicle, and they speaking French, biscuit, hands the Vegemite to the kid, eats it, and the taste of the Vegemite was so bad that he ran across to the wet, muddy side of the road, grabbed a piece of cardboard, dirty cardboard, and then wiped the Vegemite off his tongue. And then saw him still eating the survival biscuit, thought, oh, maybe he's playing a trick on me. Goes and asks for another one. Gives him the biscuit, takes another bite of the Vegemite, races across, grabs another piece of wet, muddy cardboard and wipes it off his tongue. Anyway, just a small humorous story. There was the other story of the yogurt tin that burst in midair on a kid's head, and all the other kids ran up and started licking the kid's head. Anyway, there's some fun stories in there too.
They were great kids.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that country was full of orphanages who were there. They were great kids.
Yeah.
But now it's a success story.
But now it's a success.
Can I say positive? I couldn't remember it before. So I got to do the King's coronation. So I went over as the right guide for the coronation, and one of the troops or elements of the troops that were marching were the Rwandans, and I actually told them about the story going there, and they were so proud of their nation and so happy where they come from. They call it the Singapore of Africa nowadays.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a shining light, I suppose, in all that darkness.
Team, we're out of time at the moment for questions, but as the week progresses, please take the opportunity when there is any to ask these gentlemen your questions. But thank you for your wisdom and your deep thoughts on your experiences from the past. Things that remain relevant today in leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.